So let me just respond to the last point and raise what we agree with and what we don't agree with. So it's true that Google prominently displays merchant ads with pictures at the top of the page. We've done this for several years, and every other search engine does the same thing, as I showed yesterday. Anybody who wants to sell something, any merchant who wants to participate, can upload their pictures and their ads to the page and bid to be shown in that commercial unit. Now, you have to be a merchant. You have to actually sell something. If you're not selling something, you don't appear in that box. And this is one of the points of contention by these competing shopping services. Now, they are completely free to advertise on AdWords like anybody else. And many of them do. There are many such services. The complainants don't. What they would like is free commercial clicks. And this requirement, or this claim that we need to treat the ads and the search results in the same way, is just not coherent, because the ads are ranked using bids, and the organic search results are ranked using solely a measure of relevance. So we don't see how you can possibly respond to that, because you've got two different creatures. One, the ads are at the top of the page, and the other, organic search results, are determined by relevance. And so, you know, it just doesn't really make sense, in our view, to ask for the same method of ranking both. And everybody's free to participate and to bid to be in the AdWords ads and the commercial unit with the pictures. Okay, so that's my statement about the case. And let me ask Preston a couple questions about his presentation. Of course, we agree that more data is better, at least as good, just by free disposal. And the real question in my mind is there diminishing returns to scale? And I believe in most cases there are, and I would be interested in your opinion with respect to that diminishing returns to scale question. As I understood your slide on CTR versus historical data volume, it showed that Bing does as well as Google with respect to CTR on the same set of long-tail queries, even though Google has many more queries than even though Google has many more queries than Bing on which to train its search results. And if that's true, if I interpreted that slide correctly, it indicates that more data isn't such a big deal. What matters, in my opinion, and in our opinion at Google, is the quality of the algorithms that are used. And I think the data in general is helpful, of course, but it's not the sole consideration or even the primary consideration how well the algorithms work.
The first question was, is there diminishing returns to scale? Actually, the general proposition is in the data world, that is, what is the return to scale in terms of getting better outcomes as a function of data? It's diminishing returns to scale the whole way. The S-curve isn't actually part of the prediction. It's 1 minus 1 over root n or something proportional to that. However, you're then going to turn and use the data over the set of queries that you've got. And that part is increasing returns to scale forever, because the costs we're talking about here are all approximately fixed costs. That is, the computations, all of those things are fixed costs, which are then being amortized or applied over the data that you've got. That part is increasing returns. So yes, in terms of how much better do I get as I get more data, that's diminishing returns. But then where I apply that, because it's applied as approximately as a fixed cost, it winds up being increasing returns. I could let him answer. He's obviously going to say something. Yeah, I don't know what he's going to say.
This is not really questions.
Or I could go on to his second point, but I've written that down so I won't forget it.
Then you'll have a right of reply.
What?
Okay.
No, I got to finish his second point, and I'm not going to take another point. Yeah. Okay, so the second point is that the chart showed that Bing was doing as well as Google. That was the EU only. It was not true in the US. And that suggests that more data isn't such a big deal. I was actually quite happy to see that Bing was doing well on but these are the rare queries. Actually, our guys would say because we don't have as much data as Google, we invest more heavily in algorithms. And the effect of that is you're seeing that on the rare queries because our algorithms are better. I'm not saying that's a true statement. I'm saying that's what our guys would say. I'm completely agnostic about that. I was pleased to see that on the EU data, on the EU, we are roughly at parity on this set of queries. It's not the entire set of queries. And so you can't actually then say, okay, but that means overall you've already got parity. But let's just say we're pretty happy to go tell Europeans, hey, by the way, we're actually beating Google. Hal's still standing, but he didn't seem to have anything to say because he was like passing the microphone to John.
Okay.
So fine. I mean, I don't think we're in disagreement at that point. The only thing I would mention about the increasing returns to scale with the fixed cost and the low marginal cost is it's true there's a low marginal cost per user per query, but there are many, many users and queries. So actually Google spent $44 billion last year, and I'm sure we'll be spending about $44 billion this year on the cost to maintain and run those systems. So the point that economists like to make about high fixed costs and low marginal costs, those fixed costs are really high. And so you do need to amortize those fixed costs in some way. You've still got to recover your costs.
I don't think that's right. So yes, there's this giant fixed cost that has to do with constructing the algorithms and actually ranking and so on. And then there's what's approximately a constant marginal cost for serving.
So we have data centers all over the world. We have a whole fiber network, which is very, very costly, as does Microsoft. So they're paying for these things as well. But those do depend on the amount of volume you have to serve. So it's not the textbook case of constant big fixed costs and low marginal costs. It's a case where you've got costs which depend on the pattern and amount of usage. So,
well, yeah, that's a true statement that approximately throws mud at the water in the sense that there's a giant fixed cost and there are substantial incremental, not exactly marginal costs, because a data center, you buy a data center, if nobody uses it, it's just a fixed cost. But on the other hand, we're both at a scale where we're actually building out data centers that make it look a lot more like a marginal cost than a fixed cost.
Right. So that's really a subtext. Actually, I think we're in agreement on most of the other points that you made. So,
yay.
So, other questions?
Okay, I have one for Preston, one about the Google case. I guess I'll start with the Preston one. So, one thing that confused me in the presentation, and maybe I just missed this, was it looked like you were looking to see how, and I was discussing by email with Ali, so part of this question comes from him. It looks like you were looking at how click-through rate varied with the number of queries, the number of queries that were made. And I guess what I was missing is, why is it the case that there aren't omitted variables, things like the quality of the ads or just the general interest that people have in that query, that both determine how frequently it gets searched for and whether people are likely to click on that ad? It seems like it doesn't seem like you have sort of random variation in the number of times that something is searched for. And actually your difference over time specification seems to just exacerbate that, makes that problem even worse, because why did the number of queries go up? Because people were interested, they wanted to click on it, so click on one of the ads. So it seems like the cross-sectional would be sort of bad to begin with, and the difference over time seems even worse. It seems like it calls for an experiment where you basically rerun your algorithms on half your data, then show the newly generated search results with your purposefully, worse search results, and see whether you do much worse.
So let me just answer. We were very concerned about this exact issue. In fact, I introduced this issue in saying the more popular queries are probably easier. Right? That's exactly the same point, is that the amount of data that you're seeing is itself a signal of other attributes of the queries. So what we've done to control for that is we've said, find all the queries that have less than, in the first study, less than 200 clicks in the early period, and then at least 1,000 in the later.
Yeah,
and we take all of those, and then we say, okay, that's a fixed set of queries. And then we say, how well is that fixed set of queries doing when I have 100 clicks, 200 clicks, 300 clicks, and so on.
Yeah, and that seemed even worse than the first part. And here's sort of, and your examples, at least to me, I mean, I could be totally wrong on this, but the examples you gave were cases that in particular, for example, iPad Air was one of the examples you gave. Who was going to click on an ad for the iPad Air before it existed as a product? After it existed as a product, it seems very, very clickable. So you're comparing, did the number of clicks per search go up before it was introduced as a product and then after it was introduced as a product? It seems like I would be shocked if it didn't, irrespective of your data and your algorithms.
But we are actually looking at the organic results, not the ads.
Okay, the organic, same thing. I mean, it's sort of,
but they had to have searched for it to begin with, right? So the question is, will they click on the results for the people who have actually searched for it?
I guess then you ought to show the head results or something like that, something where you think that the quality of the results didn't change, and you look at when there are big increases in the people searching.
Well, so we were worried about the quality of the results, which we went at it in a different way. Yes, is that one of the things that would be a threat to that study is that the quality of the results got better over time.
Or the preferences of the searchers.
That's a possibility. But I would have actually worried more about since they did actually express that intent, right? They searched for that phrase. The question is did the results get better? And the evidence is not a complete slam dunk. It's that first the results were almost all there, not all, like all but 2%. The results are almost all there beforehand, and that is in the pre-period. So the set of results hasn't changed. It doesn't say they didn't get better. And then we also look at what's happening to the distribution of clicks. And what you see is they're moving up the chain, and they're also actually concentrating only on result number 1. Now again, that could be because result number 1 is getting better and everything else is staying the same, for example. That would be consistent with that data.
Yeah. I guess it would be, I mean, it wasn't, you could be totally right. It didn't strike me as it struck me as there was a possibility for some confounding.
But it's not a sample selection bias going on. That is to say, because we're holding constant. So when I say it's got 900,
yeah, I'm worried about I'm actually, I think your sample construction made me almost more worried than if you'd done it in the cross section. But we should talk about that.
Well, the cross section just shows the effect much bigger, by the way. So one thing is, if you look at the cross section numbers, and again, I don't believe those numbers because because I think more popular queries are actually easier to answer. They have better URLs attached to them, and they are because they're popular, and more stuff has been optimized for them, and they're just easier to answer.
One more quick question about the Google case. So I haven't been following the Google case hardly at all until the last 2 days, and this has been fascinating hearing about it. I was wondering about the points that were made about consumer harm. I was wondering, are there concrete examples of consumer harm that you can point to? I was having trouble mapping from the abstract concept of consumer harm to the sort of concrete example of a person who searched for, say, running shoes and somehow ended up buying overpriced running shoes or the wrong running shoes because they saw these pictures of the running shoes at the top of the ads instead of a link to, I don't know, some other comparison site, and whether it would be possible to develop sort of direct evidence on whether people have already done it or whether that's going to be possible to do.
Well, it will be on the Commission to provide evidence, procedurally provide evidence on the existence of actual examples of harm as a result of the alleged discrimination concerning the positioning of the products in the end.
One last question, Damien.
Yeah, I think I can try to answer Jonathan's question. I think that I think the reasoning of the Commission would be to say, well, we don't need to demonstrate consumer harm. The problem here is that Google would be excluding rival shopping comparison sites, and therefore there would be less consumer choice, and therefore there is consumer harm. So I think that's the sort of reasoning they would be doing. Now, just a point on the slides that was shown by Martino, where he says, you know, Google search is an essential facility. Well, I'm not entirely certain. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that you like to compare products on websites, right? And you know that there are a couple of good comparison websites. Will you necessarily go through search, or will you go straight to your, you know, favorite comparison website? In other words, I mean, when it is said that search is an essential facility, it assumes that you automatically need to go through search. So I think that what is actually the interesting legal question in this case is the extent to which Google should be bound to non-discrimination principles in the absence of an essential facility. I think that's the right question. I'm not even certain that, I mean, I'm not involved in this case, but I'm not entirely certain that Microsoft would argue that Google search is an essential facility for the purpose of having access to a comparison website. I think that's the entire question.
Thank you, Damien. Emilio will say something and then...
Yeah, just to answer John's question, Ben Edelman, he has some cool stuff. He has this paper on a natural experiment. At some point, if you're looking for a flight to Los Angeles or a flight to LAX, on one query you would get Google Flights, on the other one you would not. And when the query you would get Google Flights, you also would get lots of ads. And it turns out people there ended up clicking on ads. Now, to the extent that the things you're looking for, people who are looking for you, is not necessarily the people you're looking for, because those would be the people who have high willingness to pay, you know, for your clicks. That's consumer harm, or maybe not, I don't know. But they're definitely doing something, okay?
Welfare maximizing for the consumer. I thought it was narrowly about this Google shopping.
No, I don't know anything about Google. So that would be just an example on how you can affect consumer choices by, yeah, putting.
I mean, I've done searches on Google where I felt that I could have been better off if they showed me other things.
Okay.
Okay. You have too. I think, but it's sort of, I thought the complaint was actually much more narrowly targeted.
No, yeah, I also think so. Yes.
So, as has been emphasized repeatedly, it's a two-sided market. So there's two sets of customers, as was in your point. There are the users and there are the merchants. And obviously you have to balance your weight that you apply in each of these categories. But ultimately you have to remember that the service would not be provided at all if it weren't for the revenue from ads.
Yeah.
And there would be great consumer loss, in my view, if you forbade the use of ad-supported media.
Fair
It's
enough.
true for newspapers, true for TV, true for Google.
Okay, I think we're done. It was very intense, and thank you all for staying with us.